on so that the witness will be mic'd. I understand it's on. I don't know exactly where the speakers are, but if when the witness clicks on the microphone, you can't hear in the back, please let me know. This was used last week at a hearing without a problem, but I've never personally used it. So, if everyone has signed in, that's great. If you are here and haven't yet signed a sign-in sheet before you leave this afternoon, please make sure you sign in, and anyone who wants copies of the sign-in sheet, you can just ask them to make copies. So we are here this afternoon in the matter of Algonquin Gas Transmission LLC, docket number WET-2016-025. It is the reopened hearing on the wetlands permit. I reopened the hearing after I granted a motion from the Town of Weymouth Conservation Commission to admit as evidence a notice of audit finding, notice of non-compliance issued to Algonquin Gas Transmission LLC by the Department of Environmental Protection's Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup. And today's hearing is limited to issues raised by the notice of audit findings. I allowed the applicant and the Conservation Commission to file testimony relevant to the NOAF, and those three witnesses will be cross-examined today. The applicant filed testimony from two witnesses, supplemental testimony from Mark Costa, who had previously testified in this matter, as well as pre-filed testimony from James Doherty. The Weymouth Conservation Commission filed testimony from David J.P. Foss, and he will be cross-examined as well. And we're going to begin with cross-examination of the applicant's witnesses, followed by cross-examination of the Conservation Commission's witnesses. The process will be, I'll ask you to call your witness. The witness will come and sit in this chair. I will swear the witness in. If you could ask the witness to adopt his pre-filed testimony, then when he does that, he will be available for cross-examination. Any questions?
Yes, Your Honor, I have a couple of things. Council have consulted between the Conservation Commission and the applicant, and we requested that Mr. Foster cross-examine first, and I believe that the Conservation Commission is agreeable to that.
We have no objection.
Okay, that's fine with me.
That's
So if that works for the parties, then that is fine.
Another issue I'd like to raise is kind of the scope of the proceeding. I think the notice of audit findings obviously was issued. Neither in the applicant's pre-filed testimony or really in the Conservation Commission's pre-filed testimony is there really testimony about what the notice of audit finding would lead to in terms of actual work at the site and as it plays out over time. And so, you know, we have not presented testimony on that, and we're not expecting to cross-examine on things that we're not testified about.
Mm-hmm.
I object to that because the testimony was submitted by Algonquin's licensed site professional who is overseeing the response actions at the site. His assignment was to testify as to whether or not the notice of audit findings has relevance to this proceeding. The fact that he testified to two very narrow ways in which he said that the notice of audit findings did not have relevance to this proceeding, I do not think should limit my Weymouth's ability to cross-examine him regarding other ways in which the notice of audit findings might be relevant, including the additional sampling and possible implications of that sampling and other adjustments to the analysis that are called for by the notice of audit findings. Those issues were encompassed in the motion that Weymouth filed to admit the notice of audit findings to this proceeding as relevant.
Well, I think that and I understand your point, but we're not going to be examining the scope of waste site cleanup obligations. The Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup has its process. I'm very familiar with that process, having spent 16 years as attorney for the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup. We are not going to be getting into what waste site cleanup is examining, but to the extent that the notice of audit findings raise questions about the characterization of soils at the site, characterization of the soils as historic fills and how that affected the design of the stormwater system, that's relevant. And there's testimony with regard to that issue. But we'll see where you go down that road, and I would expect that if you're veering off course into a waste site cleanup specific area, that the applicant will object to that. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay.
And then one other item, if we could go off the record for 1 second for a personal reason.
Sure. Go off.
I had a medical procedure this morning, no big deal, but it may mean that I need to take more than usual breaks.
Okay.
And more suddenly than one would appreciate. So if I give a high sign, please grant me leave. Thank you.
Okay, and while we're still off the record, if anyone at any point needs to take a break that is not within the group of parties, feel free to just quietly leave and come back. We can just signal Mr. Child if you need a break. If anyone for any reason needs a snack, feel free to have a snack, please do it quietly. And then at appropriate times, other than sort of out of the ordinary, we will take breaks for 10 minutes to stretch, get a drink of water. So, okay. Anything else? Mr. Hayden?
Thank you, Ms. Rothschild. On Thursday, the intervenor group also filed a supplemental memorandum and supplemental pre-filed testimony. And in the email filing these documents, acknowledged that the presiding officer's order that granted the commission leave to file supplemental documents did not specify the intervenor group, and to the extent necessary, we requested a leave that order also applied to the intervenor group.
Is Mr. Singleton here today?
He is.
And would you like to cross-examine Mr. Singleton?
No, we're not intending to.
Okay, so we can have him sworn, adopt his testimony, and so thank you for reminding me.
Perhaps we'll take that first.
Okay.
I have no objection to that.
Okay, any other preliminary or administrative matters before we get going?